What's going on, Spidey fans? So today we have even more Spider-Man Miles Morales promotional material, and it's with the creative team talking about why they made some of the decisions that they did and the relationships in the game. I'm going to leave the full video in the description, but let's talk about this. Here we go.
I just remember so much enthusiasm about Miles, but also like you had a great take on Miles versus Pete that I think really
Yeah.
informed a lot of our foundation.
Yeah,
I don't know
the
if you
big
want to go into
difference.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like Miles is an
He's
avatar
cooler.
of like teenage experience in a way that has advanced so much from when Peter Parker was a teenager. My shorthand for this basically is saying that I personally believe that uh, Miles as a teenager is cooler than Peter Parker as a teenager. He dresses better than Peter did. He's got friends. He's got game. He's not good game, but like he can at least talk to someone he's attracted to. Whereas Peter could barely manage that in his early years. I think he's more connected to the world that surrounds him. Peter Parker early on was a
Totally.
very reactive kind of character. And that's part of how we understood teenagers back then, right? And I think we understand teenagers differently now. Like they're their own people with their own concerns and ways of moving through the world. And I feel like you get so much of that through Miles. Um, as a civilian and as a superhero. So that was one of the things I really wanted to focus on early on when we had those first meetings.
Totally. And I think Evan talking about that really started spinning gears in our heads about like, okay,
Nice.
we
Look at
want to
that.
approach this story with a little bit more of a sense of
Ah, it looks
interconnection
so
in
awesome,
Miles's
man.
life than maybe Pete has. Pete really puts a wall up between his superhero life and his personal life.
Very much
And there's
so.
not necessarily as many people that he lets see both sides of that. And with Miles, we were really excited with his best friend, Genki Lee, to kind of has as a starting point. Okay, Genki is one of the first people that Miles told about his identity. So he's going to have a confidant and he's going to be a little bit more,
Sort of like
maybe
Ned leads
balanced in
Genki
that
Lee.
sense that he has somebody that he can
They
talk
basically
to
ripped
about
him
all this
off.
intensity that's going on. And then that kind of became a foundation for some of the
Ned leads
other
is based
thematic
on
concerns we have
Genki
with,
Lee.
the character under the mask, Miles, the human, where we made a decision pretty early on that, okay, we were going to have Miles's home base be in Harlem. It wasn't going to be Brooklyn like it's traditionally been. But we didn't want that to just be like, okay, cool, we're going to transport this character that is so closely associated with this borough to Manhattan and say, that's the way it is. We wanted to make that foundational to the story about, okay, this is going to be a story about Miles getting to know this new home that he's living in, right? What does it mean to fall in love with a new home, have that home fall in love with you? And we really tried to ground that in uh, Miles getting to know his neighbors and the residents that live around him. So that was Evan just talking about like, okay, Miles is somebody who's more balanced. He has more connections in his life. He's more comfortable with this. That was kind of grounding for a lot of what we built up, especially on the human side of his character in terms of his arc.
Well, one opportunity that Miles affords you, in terms of parsing out what's different from him and Pete, is that like he has a family. He's young enough to still have you know uh, an actual father, if not father figures, a mother who's active in his life. And an uncle like as we've seen in different iterations of the character who like impacts him in various ways, right? So like that's all things to consider when you're shaping a story around this character. And the other thing too is like I mean we can't talk about this game without talking about the way that Miles exists in other iterations. In the movie obviously is one of them, big part of them. And
The
there's that
major
scene
one.
in the movie where at the beginning where he's walking through the neighborhood and everybody's kind of hollering at him. And one of the things that you can do in a video game that you can't do in an animated movie is like you can see a give and take. There's an interactivity between the neighborhood and Miles that I think is one of the best parts of this game.
Do you guys have like a big set of emotional beats that you're trying to hit through the game? Like what's the big thing for Miles that he's trying to how is he trying to grow throughout the game?
So I think this is a very emotional story. This is emotional. This is a story about belonging, where you belong, and how you figure out how you belong. It's a story about family, very much so. Um, and this is Miles's first day on the job solo. This is Miles figuring out how to become his own kind of Spider-Man. Like there's lots of expectations around from other people about, oh, okay, here's what the other Spider-Man would do, but like Miles isn't Peter, and he
Yeah.
doesn't have the kind of experience and kind of veteran status that Peter does. So like this is his first day on the job, so he's he's trying to figure out whether
Pretty
he can
big shoes
actually
to
do
fill.
this, like wholesale by himself.
I mean, I was just going to say, like, the great thing about working with these Marvel characters and telling Marvel stories is,
That guy
we
looks
did
like
this on
Peter
the first
Parker.
game, we did it on this game. There's a huge emphasis on making sure that we're crafting both the superhuman story, like whatever's happening while he's in the mask, as well as the human personal story, like Kim is just a person. And so, like in this game, in terms of specifics, like on the human side, yeah, we were really focused on this story of Miles in a new place that he maybe doesn't know super well in East Harlem. What does it feel like to fall in love with a home? What does it feel like to have that home fall in love with you? And then on the superhuman side, we've got Miles in the middle of this war between Roxxon, this nefarious energy corporation, and the underground, this high tech gang, and really trying to take those two stories and collide them in the same way that we did on Marvel Spider-Man, where okay, this war between Roxxon and the underground, that's going to be taking place in Miles's new home in Harlem. So this place that he's falling in love with,
That
that's going
gameplay,
to be the
dude.
thing that's at risk. So that was
And
what
then when
really
you turn
started to
invisible,
inform a lot of our emotional beats. Is like, okay, how can we show Miles falling in love
wow, they
with
actually
this
show that guy
place,
like he
and how
freaks
can we
out
put it in
when he goes
danger when
invisible.
he's in the suit as well as when he's out of the suit?
I have just a personal question for Evan. You wrote Black Panther, the comic books. What's the difference there? Are there similarities between writing a comic book and then writing a comic book game?
Yeah, there are similarities. You want to figure out characters' motivations, and how they can, bang up against each other. Like um, not just typical hero villain stuff, but hero stuff too, right? Like, okay, maybe we have different points of view. The big difference, obviously, with the video game is you have different verbs you can attach to that, right? So, you can there can be an active element from the player's point of view in terms of, okay, depending on whether I do this side mission or not, for example, I'll learn more about these characters' relationship,
Yeah.
right? Like I'll learn more about why they might be at odds with each other. So, generally, video games have the advantage of presenting a whole world to you that can have different layers. Like I think you definitely get that in comic books too, but like you generally have to like swap out a subplot for a main plot, right? You've got to pass the narrative baton. Whereas in a video game, you can switch from different branches of a story pretty seamlessly depending on the design of the thing. So that was one a similarity. And like video games, you have to script so much in anticipation of another participant, which is the player. So you've got to think about, okay, well, what if they do this? What if they don't do this? Like
Oh my god, that
comic
poor
books
cat.
on print or screen are a lot more linear, and there's a lot more branching and a lot more possibility that you have to reckon with in a video game.
When we watched the demo, there was a lot of emphasis on, or maybe not a lot of emphasis, but it was clear they talked about voting. There's some really great stuff with representation, with the Puerto Rican flag and stuff like that. And I'm curious, when you guys were writing this, how important for you was it to hit some of those issues, and why is this a relevant story, especially in what 2020 is today, in the world
They
is
named the
today?
cat
It's
Spider-Man.
super important to me. Like I've written about representation in comics and video games in my career as a journalist and a critic. And uh, one of the things I was really excited about was when the team told me that this game was going to be happening in Harlem. I lived in Harlem for about 5 years, and during a time of great change, there was a lot of gentrification. There was a lot of um, conversations about the history of the neighborhood, what it meant, what was being erased, as buildings got bought and taken down, and the nature of a neighborhood changes. So there was very much a strong motivation on my part to present how special Harlem is, like what it is as a symbol, to Black people just not in the United States, not just in New York, but all over the world. People come from all over the world. It's a special neighborhood with a special history, and I wanted to make sure some of that came across, and things like Rio running for public office is such an important plot beat because um, her decision to do it comes out of a love for this neighborhood, and it's a neighborhood that Miles has not fallen in love with, like Ben said. So, I remember firing up Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry for the first time and playing it and being like, oh my God, this is my homeland. This is where I come from in the video game. Haiti is this small, poor country in the Caribbean with an amazing history that a lot of people don't know unless you don't come from there. But like, uh, uh, what that game showed the world was the pride and importance of what it meant to be from that place. And I, I think we wanted to do that. I hope that we achieve that goal, but it was definitely like a North Star for us in development.
Was there anything that you guys sat down and looked at the first game as with Miles in it and his family and said, okay, this could be better. We need to change this from how he's represented in the first game?
Well, I would say definitely the first thing you said is we got to get Miles lined up. Like he needs a cut.
Yeah,
I feel like that was the first thing.
yeah. I realized it was a time of stress and crisis, and sometimes you can go a while between cuts. But for his marquee video game, for his first appearance as a solo superhero, like he needs to get fresh. And I think the initial teaser reveal, like 90% of the feedback I saw was about his cut. And I can't take sole responsibility for that, but I definitely said something. To kind of piggyback on what Ben was saying, like after the events of the previous game, Pete, I think has a renewed kind of commitment to his personal relationships in his own life, right? So, he had to Spider-Man really hard for like the whole duration of that game, right? So like
Yeah.
by the end of that game, he's reconnected with Mary Jane. He's lost May. So like I think the idea of like work life balance for Pete is something he lost sight of and is trying to regain. And he's got like a partner now. Like who he feels is competent enough to let him mind the store for the events of this game. So what is the kind of metatextual consideration that Ben was talking about this is going to be Miles's game? We don't want him to seem like a sidekick or orthogonal in any way. Like we can ground that in the character dynamics of where Peter finds himself after the events of the previous game. So that was a really fun place to land.
So is this kind of a point of graduation for Miles, where he gets the suit?
So I would say, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, I would say it's not graduation so much as he aced the interview, he got hired, and maybe now he's on a probationary period or tryout period. And by the end of the game, you figure out whether he's cut out for this kind of work or not.
The only thing I'll say about the suit, because I know that there's stuff that we're not revealing yet, there's clearly an iconic Miles suit that exists in the world that everybody knows about. And that was another element for us. We needed to make sure that obviously that suit's going to be in the game. That suit has to be tied to an important story reason why it comes about. And that was another thing where it was like, it didn't feel right to us that Pete is going to give him this suit. No, this is Miles becoming his own hero and finding his way and figuring out how he's going to express himself.
He makes it on his own.
That's going to be his choice and driven by him. So I'll say that there's definitely reasons for why the suit that you saw looks the way that it does.
So he starts out with a mask. It seems like Peter gave him a mask to hide his identity, but then Miles kind of cobbled together his own suit with the hoodie, the jacket, the sneakers. It seems like he kind of developed his own style. In this moment of acing the interview, Peter gives him his first suit. Is that what we're seeing here?
It's his first like full on like super suit that has like the full like UI and everything, and some of the like heads up display, so that's really, if he was kind of cobbling together through like what they could make do with from some of Pete's,
old school
old stuff. Yeah. This is like this is the first like full, okay, like head to toe, I have the look of being a superhero.
I hope Pete wasn't
Wow,
given
that's
like
awesome, man.
hand-me-down masks, like previously used masks. That would be that would be gross.
I know,
That
yeah.
would be sweaty.
Especially in today's world, that's a no-go.
No,
man.
yeah.
You got to sanitize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Miles does make his own suit. Yeah, so that's really interesting because I was just under the impression that he kind of got like a full hand-me-down Spider-Man suit and kind of touched it up just kind of the way he did, Spider-Verse. But no, he actually makes his own suit. I don't know. I think they were saying the mask is going to be the one that Peter gave him, and they build the suit around. He builds the suit. That was a lot. That mask. That's honestly really cool. Really cool detail. That was a lot to dissect. But the main takeaway from this, I feel, is just the amount of attention to detail that they're putting in. Like the dialect in Harlem, that specific type of Spanish to Miles's haircut. Some people just think it's just changing the look of the character, but there's so much meaning behind these little things that you wouldn't even notice. That really just speaks volumes to, how much they care about this project and how much they want people to love this game. Because, anyone could just put in a minimum effort, video game, and because it's Spider-Man, people are going to buy it. But no, they really want this game to be as good as they can make it. And yeah, I really respect that, and I'm pretty sure they are definitely releasing these types of videos to show us that they are taking this seriously. So thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Stay tuned for more Spider-Man videos and Marvel-centric videos and all that. And that's enough out of me, and I'll see you next time.